Are Premier League fans spoilt? That's right. Dynamite conversation coming up. We went all over the place on the podcast this week. If you want to check out the full podcast, a link is in the description. But we discussed football teams, football fans, and if they are spoilt, and this is what came up. As mid-table Premier League fans, which I'm not, but like generally the idea of mid-table, I wish, right? Yeah. Which is kind of my point, is it's a very weird place to be. Mm-hmm. Like in terms of what are you supposed to dream of? What are you supposed to hope for? Like as a Fulham fan, how do you feel about? Because with Fulham are in like a nice little tidy place.
Yes,
but they've had the sort of critique of you spend 100 million and like, how could you spend 100 million? And then Norwich then go up with you and they go, why haven't they spent 100 million? Like it's a very weird place to sort of get it right, and it does feel like to me that. And I get it because that's the game, but it comes down to winning and losing.
It does. I think we have to remember that.
And expectation.
Going to a football game means different things to different people. For some people, it's about escapism. For others, it's being part of the community. For some, it's just all about the football. You've got to sort of weigh these things up when deciding if fans are entitled or whatnot. Like the interesting thing about Fulham at the moment is they're furious about the ticket price. That's the big kind of complaint at the moment is we have one of the most expensive ticket prices in the UK. They're charging sort of seniors £60 of certain matches. It's a bit of a disgrace. But the caveat is we play nice football and it is something aesthetically to enjoy. And it is interesting being a Fulham fan at the moment because we've had the really kind of tricky yo-yo years, as it were, where we had a big turnover of managers. We tried different things with different managers and it didn't work out. But it's got to a point now, Fulham, where it's quite like an honest team. We've got a few stars in the side. Robinson at left back, Paulinho obviously in central midfield. How long he stays, we don't know. Even Willian really turned up, playing great football. Leno being sort of a standout keeper in the Premier League. We're playing attractive football. We're not winning all the time, but every now and then we have a nice little cup run. We got to the semi-final of the Carabao Cup this year. Last year we got to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup and then capitulated in pretty dramatic fashion against Manchester United. It's these little like nuggets of hope that we could get back to that Europa League time. We could get back to that European football that keep a team like Fulham maybe being accepting of the fact that we are, 13th at the moment, 12th at the moment. I do think that fans being in the Premier League is a privilege in that you would rather see your team play every other week against the very top clubs. You'd rather have the best players in the world coming to your ground than being stuck necessarily in a lower division. And it's interesting, I have a friend who supports Stoke City, and year after year, sort of the shine of what was a Premier League side going and going and going, and then he sees like the signings coming in now, and I mean, he will love the club, whatever, but he does joke about the fact that, yeah, they've now fully regressed into Championship form. That's where they are now. That's the expectations. And he does sort of pine for those Premier League days again. So I do think that as a Palace fan, it is about just being stable. As a Fulham fan, it is about just being stable in the Premier League. And you never know. There will be a little push for Europe every now and then. We even saw that with Burnley getting into Europe at one point under Sean Dyche. Like, I think for a team lower down, it's all about having good ownership. It's about having sort of a cohesive structure at the club and the ability to slowly build. And you never know, you will have that year where you will create those memories which will last a long time. I promise that the memories that Fulham have of getting to the Europa League final mean more than a lot of some of the titles and the trophies that all these big clubs have won. And I think that is what is important for the fans. It's like you've got to show little glimmers of hope which you can hold on to.
Because you talk about sort of nuggets of hope. We spoke about it just before we started recording about that glass ceiling, which I think in some of the sort of the things that you're really enjoying about Fulham right now and the sort of where you are right now, I think that's interesting in comparison to Crystal Palace, because the thing with Fulham as well is that last year was unbelievable and everyone kind of had you to go down and you're still in that sort of grateful space.
Yeah.
But I would imagine Palace fans were in that grateful space for a good few seasons, and coming back to Roy Hodgson and the job he's done overall, I think overall in about 3 years' time or whatever, people will be it this has been a springboard or you've dropped. People will look back at Hodgson's time at Palace as really, really strong. But in terms of those different ingredients, how important do you think is style of play for those mid-table teams?
Well, I think this is largely why there is such a degree of apathy towards this season so far, from a Palace fan's point of view, because Roy Hodgson is the absolute definition in many people's minds of stability, the steady hand at the wheel, but the underlying numbers this season have been horrendous. So as soon as that actually disappears, there isn't a great deal left. And if we had slipped out of the Premier League, with the greatest of respect to the Sheffield Uniteds and the Burnleys, with Everton's points deduction, with a potential points deduction for Nottingham Forest, after a decade in the league, if we had gone down, it feels like the biggest wasted opportunity ever, because I'm not suggesting we want to see free-flowing football that sees us qualify for Europe. I think that's a misconception. Yeah. We just want to see something that actually the fans can get behind.
Let me know, guys. Are Premier League fans spoilt? I think you probably need to state who you support and then say your piece on it. But I think some are, and I think some aren't. But I also think it's a really weird space right now. David Moyes said this, showed his teeth at the weekend. He said, because there's been a lot of discussion over David Moyes for a long time. We've had Nikki from West Ham Fan TV on the podcast just before the Conference League win.
Yeah.
And so obviously a trophy, which is great for them, which is something that David Moyes has got and can use and has used in a quote from the weekend. Because obviously West Ham are sort of having an okay season, but aren't playing brilliantly. Henry's shaking his head here. I'll come to you in a sec. Let me just read the quote. So I think they'll, brackets the fans, honestly have to say that it's as good a time as there's been at the club regarding winning a trophy, Conference League, and league positions. Maybe there'll be managers who excite them more, possibly. Here it comes. But the one who's sitting here wins more, he said after a defeat. Now, so first of all, does David Moyes have a point here? Is he a victim of his own success, or has he stagnated? What can he genuinely do to improve on winning the Conference League? They are currently in the Europa League. And Henry's still shaking his head. Are West Ham right to be unhappy with David Moyes? Henry, why are you shaking your head, mate?
Well, look, I've said this on Football Daily and other channels, so I must have the confidence to say it here and now.
Show your chest again, go on.
No, it's just I'm on David Moyes' side on this. I think West Ham are pretty much a perfect study of what we've been talking about. They've spent a lot of money over the past few years. They've experimented with managers that hasn't necessarily worked. And yet now they've had 3 years of European football in a row, a Europa League semi-final. They won the Conference League. Those scenes that I really enjoyed seeing East London lit up like that for the trophy parade. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah,
it's a proper football area. Do you know what I mean? And it goes back to kind of what I was saying. Like West Ham is as much a community club as anything in my mind. Like it really defines that East London sector. And when you go to Stratford, you see the West Ham shirts being worn everywhere. It means. I know they're upset about the stadium, but they do have a pretty remarkable facility to play in, and they are enjoying European football every year. They've got some players like Kudus coming in who are beginning to excel. The Premier League is a tough division. It's a really tough division. I don't know why people keep forgetting this.
Okay, next prickly question, right? Is there a problem when it comes to Premier League mid-table fans of short-termism? Say like Wolves, for example. Everyone's loving Gary O'Neill, right? They're 11th. If they finish 11th with the same points, playing the same way, by the fourth season, he'll get the sack.
Probably.
I think...
But that's weird, isn't it?
It's stupid, really.
It is silly.
You talk about the Brighton blueprint. I don't necessarily think that the end game even has to be consistent European football. I think it just has to be a case, particularly with us. We are a unique case in that sense because of the Category 1 Academy in South London. It's such a huge part of our fans' identity to have that academy producing players on a regular basis.
And a huge opportunity, right?
Everyone talks about the hotbed of football that is South London. Not just in South London, all over the place. There are books on it, and now that we have a Category 1 Academy, you look at players like Noni Madueke, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, they could have all come through the Palace Academy.
There was like a weekend of English players, 14% of them in the Premier League were from South London.
You could pretty much field an 11 other than the goalkeeper from it. So and I'm not suggesting you hoover up every single player, but that side of it is a huge part of what Palace fans want to see. Yeah. David Ozo's come through the academy. You automatically get 10 or 15 games of leeway by definition. And I'm not suggesting that has to be the be-all and end-all, but it's a huge part of what makes us as fans.
Do you know, you've got me there, because actually when I'm listening to that, if I was a Palace fan, I'd be okay with going down as long as I can see, because in terms of the road out to being a top six side, any club needs to figure out what ingredients they've got, right? So say with QPR, it's a selling an Eze. We're a London club. You can get in. You'll always be able to get sort of the right kind of people, but to probably get the good players that get kicked out of the top clubs in London. We need to hoover those guys up, and we need to give them a place where those players, and also exciting loan players maybe as well, all want to come and play here under a progressive manager where you play good football, and then that leads to you maybe sneaking up, and then all of a sudden you're a part of it, right? So I get it. I actually get it now for the first time probably. Is that the thing with Hodgson is that, okay, we've got all these, we are the hotbed of young footballers in this country, and we're not seeing them. No. You have to be seeing them, for better or for worse.
And this isn't to throw individuals under the bus, but when you are prioritising the likes of Will Hughes and Jeffrey Schlupp every week over David Ozo came on away at Manchester City with an hour to go and did not look remotely out of place. Didn't start after that. Like that in itself is an incredibly frustrating place to be as a fan, because he's one of ours. He's been here since he was 8.
Because that's your nugget of hope, isn't it?
But it's not the nugget of hope, because
but it is, though, isn't it?
But you've got players.
But if you want to get into Europe and you want to win,
you talk about FFP as well. It's a huge thing, because if like Aaron Wan-Bissaka came through our academy, was in our first team for a year, went off to Manchester United, £50 million. That funds the Category 1 academy for a decade.
Wow.
You know, that in itself, I'm not suggesting you're going to produce a £50 million fullback every year.
But it's your road.
Exactly.
It's your road to the top, isn't it?
It's the only way we can actually be a sustainable, long-term Premier League project, and it's literally the biggest win you can have PR-wise with our fan base.
Yeah.
I can't say it any clearer than that, really.
Yeah, that is to give West Ham fans a bit of to hear their grievances. Their youth team won the FA Youth Cup very recently. West Ham have got a fantastic academy, and yet David Moyes is sort of very bluntly using about 15 players week in, week out, and I can understand their frustration.
So what Nicky said when I asked him was they've kind of been sold a dream here, and the roots of it are the fact of leaving Upton Park and going to the London Stadium, which they've had some incredible nights there, and that's important to sort of get it going in terms of the feeling there. But I've been to London Stadium. It's really far away from the pitch.
Soulless, mate.
It's hard work. But the sort of deal with the devil, for want of a better phrase, was that we're gonna be able to challenge. We're gonna be a sort of I guess an Aston Villa and be in that world, and they've been kind of close to that world. But I think the aesthetic of it is really interesting. Come back to the this could be our route to sort of the breaking into that top 6-7, which has got more competitive. And look, there's hypocrisy in what we're saying here, because Brighton are in that and Villa are in that right now. So that and even a Tottenham team that's lost some of its top players, and it's quite an odd squad that you've got there. But with West Ham, I think it then comes back to sort of, I don't know, it is slightly shallow to a point, but it's Moyes and Hodgson, you kind of group them together a little bit. And when you have got these really far more big names in that West Ham side, the next thing you want to see, just like with Hodgson and Palace, is, look, we've got all these kids here. Let's use them. I want to see them. Let's use our ingredients. I think for West Ham, they feel like they've got better players than the quality that they're seeing in terms of the style of playing the games of football. It's safe. It's very Moyes. It's very Moyes at Everton, and that works in terms of those tangible elements that you're talking about. But it's amazing, like in terms of the expectations of what you should receive as a football fan now, especially for West Ham fans, to sort of back up what Nicky's saying, when they're being sold this idea that, look at the money we're going to bring in, that's going to bring in these great players. That's not enough. You want to see great players playing great football these days.
But do you not think David Moyes' contract ends the end of this season? I think the fan pressure more than anything will torpedo the idea of a new contract for him. Do you not just think, get behind him until the end of the campaign? You're 9th, you're 8th, whatever it is right now. You're not too far away from potentially a Conference League play next year. You're in the Europa League knockout rounds.
They might win that.
You're in a European competition for the 3rd year in a row. There is the caveat of, fans have been sort of leached for money a lot of the time everywhere, and the cost of going to see football is obviously huge in this country. But they are getting what they kind of want, which is 3 European campaigns. Great nights at their stadium, which I know they don't particularly enjoy being there. But do you not think, just get behind it now, and then at least in the summer, there's a cut-off point where they can make a decision to go next?
Okay, quickly, question number 3. Have football fans' patience gone down, or has their footballing intelligence gone up?
XG, baby. XG.
yeah. They wouldn't listen, would they? Because what you've said there is incredibly sensible, and actually often, so for me with QPR, we've been up, we've been down. I just want to see that we're going in the right direction. And so during the Ainsworth period, I was like, this doesn't make any sense here. We've completely quit on the vision that we had. Whereas with this new manager, you're like, oh my God, I can see it. I can see it. Which again, I'm now completely with the Palace thing. Now I totally get it. You've totally won me over. Because I'm like, you need to see it. Like, you need to have something to kind of hang on to. But overall, I'm generally one of the last to go, okay, he needs to go as manager now. I've only done that sort of probably 3 times, and we've had a lot of managers at QPR.
Yeah.
But broadly, what you've said there is a very sensible take. Do you think Premier League fans, especially in the world that we work in, do you think Premier League fans are so used to so much noise and so much ups and downs and narratives that their patience has dwindled?
I would say so. I think it's a society-wide issue, to be honest. I think dopamine is something that everyone is bombarded by wherever they look now. Phones, TV, 24-hour news coverage, social media, people talking about their clubs who aren't necessarily embedded with their clubs every day. That in itself can be exhausting. And obviously the comparisons to other clubs, talked about the Brighton blueprint a fair few times on this podcast already, that it sort of gets rammed down your throat. I would suggest that the Palace fans specifically, I'm not going to labour this point, but we are somewhat different to West Ham in the sense that a lot of our core support are actually worried about the commercialisation of the club. We want to get back to a point when we got promoted in 2013 when everyone, from the ownership all the way down, were pulling in the same direction. And that sense of spirit and fight was evident, rather than this fractured situation at the board level where it feels as though there are people pulling in different directions. Hopefully Oliver Glasner does actually bring that sense of unity back. But in terms of general football fans, I think it's an inevitable part of being part of the football community now, because there's so much chatter.
Final answer on that then. Give me an answer. Are Premier League fans spoilt? Are mid-table Premier League fans spoilt? Yes or no? Or somewhere in between.
Who's going first?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
I can go first. My feeling...
The suspense is killing me.
Are they spoilt? No, I don't think they are spoilt. I think... I generally think a huge percentage of every football club's fans are impatient, stupid idiots. Mm-hmm. I really wholeheartedly believe that. But I think the sort of constraints and the sort of the dreams that are being sort of thrown at these clubs, and the bottom line, I think there's the confusion here. There's a cognitive dissonance around the idea that it's a sport, but it doesn't really feel like a sport sometimes. And I think that's the biggest problem for the whole scenario when I look at everything, is that I just see sort of chunks and brackets of clubs these days, and in between them I see these huge gaps, whereas I think before it all felt far more fluid and there felt like a lot more opportunity. We found the crumb of opportunity there if you're perfect for 20 years. And that's tough to swallow. And it's not very exciting.
I think fans accept that they're probably paying too much. They accept a lot of that balance between the club and the fans is very delicate sometimes. And I think they accept that it's a privilege to be in the Premier League, to get to see the best players all the time. But there are moments when clubs push it too far, when they begin to take advantage of the fans, whether it be the style of play, the ticket prices, whatnot, sort of the attitudes behind the scenes. That's when the kind of raw emotions of being a community and whatnot, and like what really is driving you to go see these games, that's when it really comes to the boil. So I think they are spoilt in that they get to see the greatest football product in the world week in, week out. But that doesn't mean that they don't have the right to complain, and they should not be disrespected, because at the end of the day, fans are what makes club. At the end of it's about going to support a team from your area that represents you guys. That's what football fundamentally is, and it's important every now and then that clubs remember like what their sole purpose really was meant to be.
I'll just say as well that the mid-table element of it is that all of those things are true, but you also do it in the shadow of being patronised constantly.
Without a doubt. You know, but by definition, Palace and Fulham, we're always outside of the conversation in terms of the general media spotlight by definition, because if Liverpool do something, if Manchester United do something, there are more eyeballs globally. Yeah. It's a capitalist society. That is how it works, right? We all understand that. My argument has always been it's relative to your position in whatever division you are in. If QPR, under Gareth Ainsworth, was making you miserable. You've got a new guy who's still in the bottom three, but you see signs of progress. It doesn't matter about whether you're mid-table in the Premier League. You could be mid-table in League One. If you see your team doing something progressive that gets you infused about the club that you care about deeply, that is what gets you out of bed in the morning as a fan. It doesn't matter what division you're in. Portsmouth have been knocking around in the third tier for God knows how long. Yes, they are top, but there is a mindset there that has shifted under John Mousinho this season, and it's not just results, it's the entire feel of the place, and it's intoxicating for everybody. And it's the same when Michael Carrick first went in at Middlesbrough, it's the same when Stephen Schumacher got Plymouth promoted. There's a community spirit that meshes together, and I think this mid-table Premier League spoilt thing is too reductive, because it really is it's an argument that comes down to...
Got to make a title, don't I?
Yeah, no, you don't. But it's a good question, but I think the actual answer is that football fans just want to see something, whatever division they're in, that they can buy into.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one, guys. This is the whole point of the podcast, and basically all the content we make is that, okay, look, a title of things has got to be a bit hyperbolic, but after that we get into the grey, get into the weeds of it.